Hey y'all, in this lesson we are going to be looking at constructing and interpreting scatter plots. So we want to be able to construct a scatter plot, use it to understand the relationship between the data represented. We've got some vocabulary words for you to fill in. So the first one is a scatter plot. This is a graph in the coordinate plane that shows a relationship between two sets of data. If the y values tend to increase as the x values increase, we say there is a positive association. If the y values tend to decrease as the x values increase, we call that a negative association. We can talk about these points as a cluster, which will be a group of points that lie close together. On our graphs, we might see a gap, which is an area of the graph that contains no data. Or we might have an outlier, which is a data point that is set off from the other data points. So if we have a cluster over here, and then we have an outlier up over here, that's what it's talking about. It's like it's away from like any other parts. Our essential question is, how does a scatter plot show the relationship between paired data? Let's take a look at our first example. Luciana analyzes the data collected to determine how long after posting a new blog her new homepage received its maximum number of views. Her data are represented in the table. How can she determine whether there is a relationship between the time after posting and the number of views? So we see in our data blog post numbers 1 through 7, the amount of time after which it was posted, it hit its maximum number of views. Well, we can draw a scatter plot. We can label our axes with the number of views and the hours. So we look at the data values to determine that. So we saw that it goes from anywhere from 25 up to 500. So we want to be able to account for that in our y-axis. And our hours go anywhere from 1 hour to 7 hours. So we want to be able to account for that as well. Then we plot the ordered pairs, which is the time after posting for X and the number of new views for Y. And we can see a trend. So she can use a scatter plot in order to determine whether there is a relationship. And it looks like there is some type of relationship as the number of hours passed, the number of views go down. Try this. Luciana collects data about the number of entries and the ages of subscribers who enter a concert giveaway. The point that represents the data in the fourth column, pointed by the arrow, has what coordinates? So how would you fill that in? What would be X and what would be Y? Example 2, we're going to interpret a scatter plot. Rochelle asked 10 friends how many hours of sleep they got the night before a math test, and then matched the data with their scores. She plotted her data in the graph below. Did students who slept more get a higher test score? Let's look at the way that the data points are clustered. So we can see that there is a group of points lying close together. There is a gap in this graph, and that is because there is an outlier kind of away from the group. Overall, we can kind of see that the more sleep people got, the higher their score was. So because the y values tend to increase as the x values increase, the scatter plot shows a positive association. This means that your score tends to increase as the number of hours of sleep you get increases. So positive, we can also kind of see if this was a linear equation, it would have a positive slope because it's going up. So that's how you can relate this with linear equations, is that a positive association kind of has that same looking slope. Example 3, we're going to construct and interpret a scatter plot. So we're going to do both of what we did in example 1 and 2. Avery is a middle school basketball statistician. That means she records all of the stats and stuff for the players. She tracks the number of minutes a player plays and the number of fouls the player makes. Her data are shown in the scatter plot. Is there an association between the number of minutes played and the number of fouls a player makes? So we can see here we have minutes played 0, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. And the number of fouls people made was anywhere from 1 to 4. However, what we are seeing is that the y values do not really look like they're increasing or decreasing. no matter what the x values do. So you could play a little bit of time or a lot of time. It doesn't look like there's any real association. So this scatter plot, we say, has no association between the number of minutes played and the number of fouls made. This allows us to say things like, number of fouls are not connected in any way to the amount of time played. So you're not going to say that someone's going to foul more just because they play more. Here's your chance to try. Avery also tracks the number of minutes a player plays and the number of points the player scores. Describe the association between the data points. Is it positive, negative, or not? And what does that mean? The more minutes that a player plays, do they score more points, less points, or does it not matter? To summarize our lesson here, a scatter plot shows the relationship, or we call association, between two sets of data. So we have three different types of relationships. We have a positive association, where the y values increase as the x values increase. A negative association, where the y values decrease as the x values increase. Or no association, where there is no real pattern between the y values and the x values. We can also see some of those vocabulary words being pointed out on the positive and negative associations with the cluster of points, the gap in the negative association graph, and its outlier. Your next steps are to submit your 5.1 notes, complete your build 5.1, and then take your 5.1 mastery check. Good luck.